And the idea was that they were the postal system, and they would read everybody's mail. So they had all the intelligence. And the Count of Tournontaxis, he married this woman Gloria, who became a starlet of some kind.
She was a tabloid maven for a while.
All right. So, but this guy, they were considered to be the richest family in Europe. In other words, Max von Tournontaxis was considered the richest man in Central Europe, at least in 1970, 1980. And I'm sure they're still...
Well, they used to throw some big parties over there, too. That's that same family.
Yes. And again, there are lots of branches, right? They ultimately come from Trieste. They come from the port, that was the Italian city today, was the port of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So you have the Habsburgs, the Tournontaxis, and then you have this other guy, Coudenhove-Kalergi. And this is the founder of the Pan-European Union of the 1920s and 30s, which is he doesn't get along with Hitler. He tries to get along with Mussolini but doesn't succeed. But the area where he has the best friends is the so-called clerical fascist movement of Monsignor Seipel in Austria. So there's a non-Hitlerian and indeed anti-Hitlerian brand of fascism in Austria under basically Roman Catholic priests, and that's the kind that this guy Coudenhove-Kalergi gets along with best. And then you've got people like Sir Karl Popper. Popper is he's the one that Soros idolizes the most. He's the big enemy of Plato, big neo-Kantian, I guess you'd have to call him. Quite influential. I guess he's off the charts now. And then William Buckley. And William Buckley and the Buckley clan, right, the National Review Circle. It's interesting, the libertarian monetarist, I guess, Murray Rothbard, writes somewhere that in the 1950s at the National Review under Buckley's leadership, they would sit around and talk about the restoration of monarchies in Europe. In other words, how Europe would be better off under monarchies. It would be time to go back to the Habsburgs and the Tournontaxis and the Bourbon and the Hohenzollern and here and there and everywhere. And I think you get the idea. These are people who are enemies of the modern state. And what they found in the 1940s was there was a very successful form of modern state, and it's the American New Deal state, which I would argue is the most successful form of human organization which we've come up with so far. It is, after all, the one that managed to hold off Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Mussolini, Tojo. It opened the secrets of the atom, reached out to put, at least we think, people on the moon, and began solving some of the, it's the first society in human history where the middle class is the majority of the entire population. That has never been done until the mature New Deal of the 40s and 50s. And it's based on things like the Social Security Act, the GI Bill of Rights, the various other protections that are built in, minimum wage laws, and things like this. In other words, it's a regulated form of capitalism, and it's highly successful. Von Hayek didn't like this, and he wrote this book, The Road to Serfdom, and it's very interesting what he says in there. He says, I understand that, in effect, Franklin D. Roosevelt wants to have a Tennessee Valley Authority for the Danube River. Right? Think of it, the Danube River Basin. And this is something that Roosevelt had brought up at Yalta. He said, why don't we do what we've done with the Tennessee River Valley? We can have hydroelectric, we can fight malaria, we can have power irrigation, modernize the whole place. Von Hayek says, no, you can't do that, because there's no way that you can decide who's going to get the benefits, because the Hungarians and the Romanians, he says, will never agree about who should get what out of this. So it's a tremendous pessimism. The ultimate standpoint of the Austrian school is they say that the amount of wealth in the world cannot be increased. In other words, there's nothing you can do to increase the well-being of humanity. Can't be done. And corollary of that, economics is something you can never understand. In other words, economics is there's no way to predict the results of what you're going to do. They always say people who are trying to do good always do bad, and people who are trying to be egotistical do good. Well, that's ridiculous. It's just crazy, because what it basically means is there's no way to to plot a course to do something good. In other words, we're basically living in a world we'll never understand. This they get from a guy called Ernst Mach, M-A-C-H, who's the big intellectual, scientific, philosophical honcho of Austria in the period, say, 1890 to 1914. So it's an absolutely bankrupt school, and it's basically people who would like to go back to feudal aristocracy, and their goal is to weaken the nation state to the point where they can do it. And in this, they represent the new world order, and I'll try to explain why.
Very good. Crazy Otto is 96.
He's 96, right.
Still trucking along. Otto von Habsburg. Hi.
Crazy Otto.
Yeah.
Hoping for the crown of Bohemia.
I guess he's the emperor. He calls himself the Emperor of Austria. Now, all right. We'll be right back in just a couple. Okay, I'm back, and for those of you who listen often, you've heard me in the past refer to Webster as, in my opinion, America's truly greatest living historian, and I think you can see why I say that. He is an extraordinary man in many respects, but his grasp of current events vis-a-vis past history I have never seen equaled or heard equaled. That's a compliment.
Thank you. Let me take advantage of that to direct people's attention to my books, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. They're at Amazon and many other places. And we're going to bring out a second edition now of Surviving the Cataclysm, Your Guide to the Worst Financial and Economic Crisis in Human History.
Oh, well, let me help you launch that. That's
came
good.
Out in actually it was December 1998 into January 1999, so exactly 10 years ago. Wow. And this is going to be a second edition of that brought up to date. And again, the point of it is, if you want to build, we could spend the hour, I'm sure, talking about all the foreign policy horrors that are going on in the world.
Yeah,
but the point is, you'll never build a movement of resistance against that unless you have an effective and rational economics. And it cannot be this free market stuff, because it's basically you're building everything on a myth. You can look around the world today, or any time in the last 1,000 years, I venture to say, you'll never find a free market. What you will find is trusts, cartels, monopolies, oligopolies, duopolies, anything but this fantastic picture of a free market. It just does not exist.
Webster, real quick, what happened to the antitrust laws that were supposed to do so much good?
Well, we have Sherman antitrust and Clayton antitrust, but they're not enforced.
No, never. They really never have been.
Correct. But the only way you get them enforced, I mean, there have been times when they were enforced. I mean, under the New Deal, there were moments where these things were enforced.
Look at now, though. I mean, geez.
Well, we're completing, this cycle, which we don't know what's going to happen now, but we've certainly had a 40-year cycle from the Nixon election of 1968 until now, where reactionary Republicans have been in command, and they've been preaching various versions of Friedman and von Hayek. I just wanted to mention that if you want to see where these ideas have actually been put into practice, von Hayek was he was probably the key guy organizing the Mount Pelerin Society.